Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches. It's that time of the week where we take a trip around the world in 25 minutes. I'm Teniola Shoboale. On the program this week, the return to some form of normalcy. U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention announces new freedoms for the fully vaccinated members of the population. Plus, schools across England reopen in Prime Minister Boris Johnson's first step of lockdown easing. Americans who have been fully vaccinated are now allowed to meet each other indoors without wearing masks on the long-awaited guidelines released by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The guidelines released on Monday says those who have been fully vaccinated can also safely gather indoors with unvaccinated people from a single household without wearing masks.
New guidance from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control were announced on Monday for those who have been fully vaccinated against COVID-19, giving them some leeway to resume more normal activity even while the coronavirus is still widely circulating.
We've been through a lot this past year.
CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky said individuals fully inoculated against COVID-19 can meet in small groups with other vaccinated people in private settings such as homes without wearing masks.
CDC recommends that fully vaccinated people can visit with other fully vaccinated people in small gatherings indoors without wearing masks or physical distancing. Remember, here we are talking about private settings where everyone is vaccinated. So what does this mean? If you and a friend or you and a family member are both vaccinated, you can have dinner together wearing masks without distancing. You can visit your grandparents if you have been vaccinated and they have been too.
She defined fully vaccinated as those who are 2 weeks past their second Pfizer or Moderna shot or Johnson & Johnson single-dose vaccine. Walensky also said fully vaccinated people can visit a single household of unvaccinated people without wearing masks if those not vaccinated are considered low risk. Those fully vaccinated, however, should still wear masks when visiting unvaccinated people from multiple households. And they should continue with other precautions, such as avoiding medium and large-sized in-person gatherings.
At this time, the CDC is not adjusting current guidance on travel. We believe these new recommendations are an important first step in our efforts to resume everyday activities in our communities. However, we remain in the midst of a serious pandemic, and still over 90% of our population is not fully vaccinated, though we are working hard to get there. Therefore, everyone, whether vaccinated or not, should continue to avoid medium and large-sized gatherings, as well as non-essential travel, and when in public spaces, should continue to wear a well-fitted mask, physically distance, and follow other public health measures to protect themselves as others.
The recommendations come as about 30 million people, or 9.2% of the U.S. population, have been fully vaccinated. Millions more have had their first shot. As vaccinations accelerate to a record 2.2 million shots per day, cases and death continued to decline last week. Despite the positive trends, health officials have warned that the country could see a resurgence in cases as more infectious variants of the virus have been found in nearly every state. Over 525,000 people in the U.S. have died of the virus, or 1 in every 621 residents.
Over in Israel, as restaurants reopen this week under an exit plan driven by fast-paced vaccinations, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said the country has almost emerged from its third and hopefully final COVID-19 lockdown. The easing of restrictions come after months of government-imposed shutdowns and less than 3 weeks before the country's fourth parliamentary elections in 2 years.
We're almost done with COVID-19 closures. That's the message from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu as restaurants reopen across the country on Sunday.
The Green Passport restaurants coming back to life. We still have to watch ourselves. We have to wear masks, keep the distances that people require, but social distance. But we're coming out of it, and there's not much more. We just have to have a few 100,000 more people, especially 50-year-old jabbed. And we're going through the first phase. We're done. We'll be done. Not yet done, but we'll be done.
Despite the optimism, health officials cautioned that rising contagion could trigger another lockdown, a possible dampener on Prime Minister Netanyahu's hope of parlaying his pandemic policies to victory in the March 23rd ballot. As about 53% of Israelis haven't received at least one dose of the Pfizer vaccine, the government has been gradually reopening businesses, schools, and the country's main airport with caps on capacity. Some leisure venues have limited access to customers who can prove COVID immunity with a so-called Green Pass issued by the Health Ministry in what officials hope will win over Israelis still reluctant to get vaccinated.
I'm very excited that things will go back to normal, but let's see how it works.
And now we're really exciting because of the reopening of the seating and the restaurants, and our people can sit here and enjoy their coffee with a beautiful view in front of us.
Israel emerged from its third lockdown last month, and the Netanyahu government has pledged there will not be a fourth.
Millions of students in England headed back to school this week for the first time in 2 months, having enjoyed their second extended stretch of home learning because of a strict national lockdown. Meanwhile, as part of the UK's phased-out plan out of lockdown, care homes residents are also now allowed to receive their first indoor visitors in months.
After months of remote learning, millions of English children and teenagers returned to school on Monday. The reopening of schools is the first step in a 4-stage government plan to ease the lockdown while trying to prevent a new surge in infections. New safety measures for pupils include regular hand washing, staggered arrival times, and social bubbles. For secondary schools, the requirements are more onerous, with teenagers being mass tested for COVID and required to wear masks in the classroom.
I'm a lot more confident, as I know that people that have tested positive won't come in, and that will make it a lot more safe environment at school and allow the school to stay open. And I don't think anyone wants to go back to homeschool.
I think the testing process is going to be effective, so I'm quite confident in the our school's capability to make sure that all of our students are back in school and just get back learning.
The near consensus has been getting children back into the classroom is essential for their mental health, education, and life chances.
I would say it's the most important thing for young people to be back in schools and, continuing with their education. I think the loss to learning has been quite significant, but also really to support their well-being and their mental health. We know that within school they really thrive, and we continue to build their futures and those positive relationships and set them up for success.
Most pupils had missed out in more than 3 months of school in the spring and early summer of 2020 when Britain was under its first strict national lockdown. Things have also opened up for England's care home residents who are now allowed one regular visitor. Many had not been able to meet their loved ones since March 2020.
Last in the home inside 15th of March last year, which I think was Mother's Day. But I've seen her a couple of times when she's been in hospital, and I've been able to see her in A&E and grab a couple of moments there, but all the rest of the time has been through the window.
For adults in England, the lockdown remains in force, with social contact severely restricted. People are under stay-at-home orders, most shops are closed, and cafes and restaurants are only able to offer takeaway or delivery. The remaining 3 steps of the government's plan to ease lockdown are due to kick in April, May, and June, subject to a continued reduction of coronavirus infections.
Neighboring South American countries, Brazil and Argentina, are taking very different steps at the moment in the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. While Argentinians are embracing the nightlife again, in Brazil, amid warnings that hospitals are close to collapse, officials have imposed tighter restrictions.
It's night and day in South America as Argentina and neighboring Brazil march to the beat of a different drum. Nightlife has returned as Buenos Aires loosens its restrictions. The historic opera house, Colón Theatre, has welcomed back customers for the first time in a year since the pandemic shut it down. Some musicians still played it safe with their masks on. Authorities have also allowed restaurants and bars to stay open later with indoor dining. Film buffs were able to return to cinemas at the start of this month, which couldn't come fast enough for businesses.
It was a complete year of loss for cinemas, and to estimate it in dollars, in Argentina, the loss in box office across the sector nationally was about $120 million.
Buenos Aires had imposed one of the region's toughest and longest lockdowns last year. Argentina's president, Alberto Fernandez, has taken a tough stance in combating the health crisis, a sharp contrast to President Jair Bolsonaro in neighboring Brazil, who has long sought to diminish the gravity of the virus. While COVID-19 deaths and infections are falling globally, that's not the case in Brazil. Mounting concerns over a surge in new infections pushed Sao Paulo state to impose a partial lockdown this week. Rio de Janeiro adopted a nighttime curfew among other new restrictions. On Tuesday, traffic in Rio was light on a normally busy street, and over by the beach there were balls in the air but little signs of business.
It's all closed, deserted. There is no one. But that's the way it needs to be, so as to improve the terrible situation in the country.
It was a marvelous night back at the Cologne Theatre, where the audience clapped, perhaps in the hopes of a return of something resembling normalcy.
Meanwhile, the United Nations says thin welfare systems in Latin America is dragging many into astronomical debt and poverty. The region, where countries are seeing a mix of reopening and new waves of COVID-19, has been hard hit by the pandemic, with 22 million people pushed into poverty and weak social safety nets.
Sandra Contreras is wiping away tears outside a hospital in Lima, Peru. It's not just because her mother is inside deeply sick with COVID. It's because to pay for the treatment, she's become so desperate that she may need to sell her house. And she's not the only one. Across Latin America, where healthcare systems and social safety nets are thin, many people are being forced to put up the cost of treatment out from their pocket.
I've pawned all my things. I've been left without work. I told my siblings, what do I care if we have to sell the house to save my mother? We're going to do it to save her life.
There are others literally camping outside the hospital, such as Yoslin Mati Corena, who says she doesn't have any money to her name anymore, and that the hospital is going to disconnect her father from a life ventilator and she doesn't know what to do.
I've been here for 11 days. I have no work. I don't have a single penny because I've sold everything. I'm here camping out because I'm the only family member watching out for my father. My mother and my sister have symptoms for COVID. I don't know what I'm going to do because I've already lost everything. No one is helping us.
The United Nations estimates that 22 million people in Latin America are being pushed into poverty because of the pandemic. The wave of indebtedness comes as millions of Latin American families grieve loved ones who died during the pandemic. The region has recorded more than 690,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths, second only to the death toll in Europe.
When Foreign Dispatches returns in just a moment, Americans celebrate their first female vice president on International Women's Day. Please stay with us. It's been 1 year since the first case of COVID-19 was recorded in South Africa. While the country remains the most affected country in Africa on record in terms of confirmed cases and COVID-related deaths, it also has the highest number of tests done, with more than 9 million tests carried out so far. Our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, tells us more.
It's been an eventful 365 days for the world, to say the least, in South Africa. 1.5 million confirmed cases and over 50,000 COVID-related deaths later. It's still very heartbreaking for many to look back. Nontokozo Ngcobo got exposed to the virus at work mid-last year. She survived. Her father, Hlalani Ngcobo, who was diabetic, didn't. He succumbed to the virus in August, aged 72.
This kind of a day is a reminder of things of pain that happen to most South Africans, to the people out there globally, that, because this thing happens so fast it happens so fast to everyone. And only now that we're realizing the pain that we've decided to put to bury as well. But it keeps coming back that, our people died without their loved ones. They died alone.
Like all countries, South Africa has stumbled through it all, and now vaccines are getting in the arms of many. Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize participated in a webinar to mark 1 year of COVID in the country with the National Press Club, which named COVID-19 the newsmaker of 2020, where he spoke on lessons learned in the past year.
I think with all of the partnership, we're working together, the social solidarity and the unity of South Africa is in a better place today, even though we still have not defeated the disease, but in fact it is probably going to be easier in future to be able to face similar other challenges so that we are able to make sure that our country survives. So with that, for me, I think there's been a very good lesson of what the country can do together.
I think we can all just leave thinking about the 50,366, I think the total is now, the people who have lost their lives to COVID over the past year. We shouldn't let our guard down, as you said. We should all work together to ensure that we don't lose as many lives next year as we have in the past year.
While the recovery rate has gone above 94% in the country, the general appeal is for continued adherence to health safety regulations, especially as scientists have warned that a third wave of infections may be closer than expected in the approaching winter months in South Africa. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
In her speech before the European Parliament on International Women's Day, an event aimed at celebrating women's empowerment and leadership during COVID-19 times, U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris called on nations to build a world that works for women. She says doing so is not just an act, but a show of strength. Our Washington, D.C. correspondent, Maria Bird, tells us how Americans celebrated the event this year with their first ever female vice president.
It's historic times in the U.S. The first Women's History Month and International Women's Day while having a female vice president.
Our world does not yet work for women as it should. COVID-19 has threatened the health, the economic security, and the physical security of women everywhere. The pandemic has overloaded healthcare systems, making it even harder for women to access the care they need. At the same time, women comprise 70% of the global health workforce, putting them on the front lines and at risk of contracting the virus. Other women have been forced out of the workforce entirely. I believe we must ensure women's safety at home and in every community. We must ensure that women can access high-quality health care and that those health needs particular to women are addressed. We must treat women with dignity at work and put in place the structures needed so that women can both care for their families and excel in the workforce. Finally, we must give women equal voice in decision-making, for this is essential to free and fair democracies.
U.S. Vice President Harris spent part of International Women's Day addressing the European Parliament as President Biden nominated 2 women to be promoted to the rank of 4-star general.
And we all need to see and to recognize the barrier-breaking accomplishments of these women. We need the young women just beginning their careers in the military service to see it and know that no door will be closed to them. We need women and men throughout the ranks to see and celebrate women's accomplishments and leadership in the services. We need little girls and boys, both, who have grown up dreaming of serving for their country to know this is what generals in the United States Armed Forces look like. This is what vice presidents of the United States look like.
While President Biden highlights trailblazing women in America, 2 female small business owners and social activists share why International Women's Day is critically important.
When I think about International Women's Day and Women's Month, so many women that came before us in the past, and this is what Kamala Harris, our vice president, is standing on the shoulders of these great, accomplished, powerful, empowered, brave women.
I stand here proud as an African American woman today as we have broke the glass. We have shattered the glass. Why? Because the United States of America voted in the first African American woman, the first Asian woman to be the vice president of the United States. For that, I am so proud. Not only are we celebrating International Women's Day, we're celebrating Women's Month. But guess what? We're going to celebrate women throughout the whole year. Women should be proud. We have broken the glass ceiling.
International Women's celebrations were just the beginning of gender equality focus in the U.S. From Washington, Maria Bird, Foreign Dispatches.
Speaking of phenomenal women, let's meet Nancy van der Straten, known by the locals as Auntie Nancy. She's fighting off Parkinson's disease with some highly impressive grandma boxing in Turkey. Take a look.
Donning shiny gloves and purple sneakers, 75-year-old Nancy van der Straten hops into the ring to practice non-contact boxing in a bid to battle severe symptoms of Parkinson's disease. 6 years after her diagnosis, the Belgian woman who lives in Turkey discovered the benefit of non-contact boxing by chance while researching the disease. Ever since, she has been perfecting her punching by going to a gym 3 times a week.
It does not stop you, Parkinson. Parkinson is a degenerative disease. It never stops. But you can keep slow it down, and you can it's like a break. And instead of being miserable, do all week, you stand up and you say, oh, today, boxing. Stand up, get ready, go to box, and after the boxing, after two hours training, you feel really better.
Non-contact boxing does not involve taking any punches, so there is no risk of head trauma. Known as Auntie Nancy, she said when she first stepped into the boxing ring, locals watched the grandmother of 8 with their mouths agape.
If you are more than 50 years old, they really look at you like this. What are you coming to do here? But they are gentle from heart, the Turks, so they let me do. And in the boxing ring, here they accept me completely. I'm here for 3 years now. But when I say I'm making drawings, people are not really interested. When you say I'm a boxer, huh? The reaction is immediately.
Parkinson's, a progressive disease that affects millions of people worldwide, produces tremors and stiffness, as well as problems walking and speaking. Despite limited research, intensive exercise has been associated with improving patients' lives. A furniture designer and painter, Van der Straten perfects her punching 3 times a week and encourages others with Parkinson's to find a sport they love and stick with it. Ms. Van der Straten says she refuses to let the disease slow her down and will keep fighting for as long as she can.
This is where we say goodbye till next time. Remember, our top stories are never far away. You can catch them on channelstv.com. You can also leave your comments and suggestions on the addresses showing on your screen. Thank you so much for watching the program. I'm Tenyola Shoboale. Stay safe.